Hi, everyone, and welcome to I Hear Dead People, the podcast that celebrates the joy of seeking truth for its own sake with some of the greatest thinkers and teachers of the past. I'm Dorian Positano.
And I'm Tom Asacker. In this, our debut episode, we sit down with Siddhartha Gautama, better known as the Buddha, to discuss desire, enlightenment, and, wait for it, the end of suffering.
We're excited to have you on this journey of inquiry towards a better mind, a better spirit, and a better life. So sit back, relax, and repeat after me. Om.
Listen, learn, and laugh a little.
And I knew I am. I am what I am.
The experiencer is the experienced.
And it means looking at things which one takes for granted and suddenly seeing that they're very, very odd.
How do you keep your center when everybody around you is losing theirs?
And the thing that you call yourself, to which things happen, is just something that happens.
So, how you doing?
Strangely, I'm feeling pretty calm.
Just remember, you're going to be meeting Mr. Calm. So try to inject some emotion into the conversation or you'll end up putting all our listeners to sleep.
I hear you. Well, I've got some questions that ought to stir them up a little bit. Anyway, is there anything in particular that I should know or anything you think I may have missed?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it should be a pretty straightforward interview. According to most historians, the Buddha lived around 2,500 years ago in what is present-day Nepal, along the southern slopes of the Himalayan mountains.
Himalayan or Himalayan?
Potato, potato. Anyway, his teachings, or dharma, has blossomed into various beliefs, schools, and disciplines, all under the umbrella brand called Buddhism, which is followed by more than 500 million people worldwide.
500 million. Wow. So I guess my goal is to get at the essence of that brand.
If you can. I mean, remember, you're meeting with the original Buddha, Gautama Buddha, or Sakyamuni Buddha, the guy who started it all, and not any of those other real or mythical Buddhas.
The historical founder of Buddhism.
Yeah, that's right.
And would you tell me that there have been 28 living Buddhas?
So far, yes, but Buddhists list 29. They've assigned number 29 to some guy who hasn't even been born yet, someone they call the Buddhist of the future.
Does he have a name?
That's something like Maitreya or Medya. And look, I read that the Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, said it's possible that the next Buddha will not take on any individual form. Instead, he may take the form of a community practicing mindful living. So I'd forget all that and, like you said, just try to get at the essence of the Buddha's teachings.
Got it.
Have fun. I'll catch up with you later.
See you soon. Siddhartha Gautama, thank you for being here today.
It is a true pleasure to be one with you.
Well, for me too. But hey, before we dive in, I've read that many have called you Shakyamuni, the sage of the Shakya clan. But I also know that most Buddhist texts refer to you as Bhagavat, Blessed One or Lord. And supposedly, you'd often refer to yourself as the Tathagata, which has as many as 8 different interpretations, like one who has thus gone, or one who has thus come, or even apparently one who has thus not gone. Anyway, it's all a bit confusing. So could you just tell me how you'd like to be addressed?
Think of a person who has many names in your culture.
All right. Well, there's this rapper, Kanye West. First he went by Kanye, then Yeezy, and now he's just Ye.
Many names, just one being, correct?
Yeah.
So, no confusion. Maybe a bit of a God complex. And for the record, that's not my thing.
Okay, so look, how about I just call you Sid?
Make whatever sound you wish.
Sounds good. So, Sid, you're our very first guest, and I simply have to ask, how does it feel to be dead?
Ah, yes. The age-old obsession with what comes next. So, do you recall that feeling you had right before you were born into this world?
Honestly, I can barely remember what happened last Sunday.
I see. Well, for most people, it feels just like that.
I see what you mean, but I'm not really sure I get it.
It's beyond reckoning. It is samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth without beginning or end.
Ah, so the Lion King was right about the circle of life. Or maybe it's more like the Matrix. As tempted as I am to learn more about this samsara, let's instead begin with a little bit about your life. So tell us about your childhood and what led you to embark on your spiritual journey.
I wouldn't call it a spiritual journey,
Hmm.
and we can certainly discuss that very important distinction. But yes, the early years were quite formative. You see, although my mother died soon after I was born, I enjoyed a very stable and privileged childhood. My father, who was the leader of the Shakya clan, shielded me from the harsh realities of the world outside our grounds and provided me with all manner of luxury and comfort.
Hmm.
At the snap of my fingers, I could summon any form of entertainment beyond your wildest imagination. I was also educated by the top philosophers and Brahmins, trained in archery, swordsmanship, wrestling, and meditation. And to top it all off, I married a beautiful princess.
Wow, that sounds pretty nice. Kind of like the summer camp I went to as a kid. Although, no princess, just an occasional dance with the girls' camp. Man, I love camp.
I'm guessing you had s'mores. Although I would have had my staff prepare samosas. In any event, I was pretty spoiled, living in a gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. And that served to attach me to my circumstances and way of life.
Very interesting. So, how old were you when you decided to leave home? And why did you leave? I mean, that's the one thing I don't understand. You had everything, and you were on the brink of starting a family. So, what in the world compelled you to go searching for something more?
You are correct. I left my home and my wife and infant son just prior to my 30th birthday. And one might say that I had it all, but I felt there must be more to life than what I was experiencing. You see, I was loved, celebrated, a source of joy for everyone except myself. The opulence, the love of my father, my family, friends, and yet my heart was not satisfied. Nothing I received, and again I had it all, could quench my thirst and relieve my anxieties. I sensed that what I sought could not be found in my comforting environment. So, to find out, I convinced my chariot driver to take me on an excursion into the city, which, prior to that, my father had forbidden.
So, basically, you gave up on what everyone around you said you should want, grabbed an Uber, and left? I guess you felt pretty silly when what you discovered out there was a lot worse.
What I experienced outside of the Shakya community is, in fact, what compelled me to eventually hop on my horse and leave for good. You see, prior to that fateful trip, I had never experienced the stress, inequities, and hardships of life. Realities like aging, sickness, and even death were unknown to me. I never knew that people suffered at all.
Is that right?
I know, it must be hard to believe. At one point during my chariot ride, I bumped into a holy man begging for food. This man had renounced all worldly pleasures, and yet, unlike me, who had everything, he was calm and content, which puzzled me even further. I simply had to understand all of this, and so I left for good in the dead of night to find out.
So, what would you say you were really searching for? And what gave you the confidence that you'd find it? I've read that you didn't even say goodbye to your wife and baby. So you really left without hesitating at all or second guessing yourself. And I'm curious to understand what drove your resolve that there would be something out there.
This is true, and I wish I could articulate my state of mind at that time. In fact, like you with last Sunday, I can't even recall it. I honestly had no idea what I was searching for. I was not aware. However, I was sure that I could not go back.
Well, you know, someone once said, I think it was Marcus Aurelius, that it's possible to be happy even in a palace. So it sounds to me like you were having some kind of an existential crisis, searching for yourself.
In a sense, that is very true.
So, what happened next?
6 very long years of searching for the answer.
Again, the answer to what?
My true nature, the true nature of reality, especially as it relates to life and death, and human suffering and despair, and how to live free of that discontent.
And those years of searching led you to the answer?
Yes and no. I had a goal, which was to become empty, empty of wishing, empty of joy and sorrow, empty of dreams. I was looking for the answer to my innermost being, the ultimate part of me that I thought would awaken once I deprived myself of every urge. Essentially, when myself had died.
Sounds like a pretty lofty goal and kind of scary. So, walk us through some of those initial experiences. It's hard to imagine quieting all of your wishes, dreams, and desires.
Indeed, living a life as a wandering seeker of truth and abstaining from all forms of indulgence can be quite a shock to the system. And I decided to take it to the next level with extreme fasting and other painful experiences, like standing silently in the burning rays of the sun or sitting motionless in the freezing rain in various poses, trying to slow my breathing and heartbeat in order to become free from myself.
And did it work?
Oh, I escaped many times, only to return to my mentally constructed world, along with all of its difficulties and unpleasantness. So you see, by unceasingly asking and following the guidance of others, listening to various gurus and performing various disciplines, which, by the way, damn near killed me, at one point I looked like a living skeleton. I was led to believe that I would discover the answers to my questions, but I did not. Liberation eluded me, and so I simply stopped.
Look, no offense, but if I'm being honest, that sounds beyond extreme to me. I read that you actually ate a single grain of rice a day, and at one point you started drinking your own urine. So stopping must have seemed like the sensible thing to do, no?
Those who judge will never understand, and those who understand will never judge.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to judge.
I'm just teasing. But seriously, I had no idea that stopping was sensible, as you say. The pain was clouding my mind, and I was simply at my wit's end. So I just stopped doing everything, including waiting and hoping, and decided to not move until I had all of my answers.
And that's when you sat down under the Bodhi tree and became enlightened.
It was simply a large fig tree, but yes.
Oh, I thought it was a mango tree.
Oh my lord, is that what they're saying now?
I don't know. I think it had something to do with your previous life as a king. But let me ask you this. Why, if you looked like a living skeleton, do all of the Buddha statues portray you as a jolly fat guy who looks like Chris Farley?
Chris who?
You know, Tommy Boy.
I have no idea who that is. And those statues aren't portraying me.
They're not? Who is it then?
Budai.
Who?
You know, Budai. Hote. He's like the Japanese Santa Claus. Google it.
All right. A bit of cultural ignorance on both our parts, I suppose. Anyway, I've read that you spent 40 odd days sitting under that tree and that you were tempted repeatedly by the demon Mara. Is that right?
Yes, I was pestered by the Lord of the Senses, who, by the way, was simply trying to distract me and keep me from the truth of existence and my conscious affirmation of life.
That's very interesting. In an upcoming episode, we'll be speaking with Jesus of Nazareth, who spent about the same amount of time fasting alone in the Judean desert, and he was also tempted by a demon.
That is interesting. I'm sure the manifestations were similar. Frightening thoughts, ghastly demons, and when that didn't work, various temptations like power and status and various sensory pleasures like food and drink and other worldly delights. Did Jesus' demon also challenge his awakening?
Absolutely. His demon tried to get Jesus to throw himself off a high wall to prove his awareness.
Oh, suicide. Ah, yes. the deva of death's greatest trick. He's a master of the art of illusion and self-deception.
He certainly is. But hey, before we go on, I am a bit confused about something. Why is pleasure a problem and a distraction or hindrance to a spiritual life? Isn't pleasure a natural and useful aspect of the human experience?
Eat your cake and have it too. Of course, there is nothing wrong with pleasure, unless it leads to craving and attachment and mental suffering, like addiction and ill health, or like how Mara uses it to draw us away from our highest aspirations as a human being.
I see.
To diminish us instead of helping us expand and blossom so that we may find a deeper sense of fulfillment and connection to the world and to others.
I'm sure we'll be digging a lot deeper into that subject, but for now, please tell us, how did you resist Mara?
I didn't resist him. I calmly acknowledged his presence and was quite curious about him. And so I finally figured out what he was up to. All of his mental manipulations and empty assertions about life, which, by the way, were nothing more than my own worldly conditioning. And so I ignored him. I stopped searching for an answer and expecting a way out, and by doing so, freed myself from his power and influence.
I could spend hours with you just trying to understand that inner battle and how you won it, but our time is limited, so let's discuss what you discovered.
You people and your obsession with time. But I understand. And please let me clarify. It was not a battle. It had nothing to do with determination and will. This is very important. The so-called battle ends when you become aware of it. Because one can never win a fight against Mara with his clever moves of analysis and argumentation. Instead, I saw the self-deceptive illusions for what they were, touched the solid ground at my feet, and Mara simply disappeared.
I think I understand.
It is all about self-understanding and self-transformation. And by my discoveries, do you mean what people refer to as the Four Noble Truths?
Yes, the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path.
Very well, but please understand, the truths and the paths are not noble. Rather, it is those who understand them who are noble.
I see. So, the four truths of the noble, then.
The spiritually noble, that is correct. And I don't think we'll be able to get to all of the teachings. So let us focus on the truths, which are the essence of my realization.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so the first truth is the truth of psychological suffering. Specifically that it is an unavoidable aspect of living an unexamined and unaware life. And to be clear, I am not talking about pain. All living beings experience pain. Physical pain, the pain of loss of a loved one. Suffering is different. It is self-reflective thoughts and emotions.
I see. And honestly, that seems kind of obvious. In fact, we're hoping to speak with Socrates in a future episode about living an examined life.
You say that, but is it obvious? I don't think so. Many people have no idea that they suffer because of their own thinking, and that it is a personal choice to accept it as one's reality or not. You see, one suffers only as much as one chooses to remain trapped in self-deceptive patterns of thought and behavior. And at any given moment, one can choose to be free.
Really? Okay, well, how? I mean, it sounds easier said than done.
How? That's all I ever hear. Anyway, you're jumping ahead to the fourth truth.
All right, sorry. Please continue. I've waited more than 3 decades to become enlightened, so I suppose I can be patient for a few more minutes.
Patience has nothing to do with it, my friend, as you will see. But let us continue. So again, the first truth is dukkha, an unpleasant, noisy and bumpy ride. You know, anxiety, struggle, discomfort, losing what you have, not getting what you want, aging, sickness. If you dislike what's happening, it's probably dukkha.
Well, I don't like cilantro. Is that dukkha?
You are a funny person. Does cilantro create dis-ease for you?
No, I simply avoid it.
Well then, there you have it.
So it's all about choices then.
Right. Do you really believe that you're going to get your life in order and achieve everlasting happiness and peace by picking and choosing this over that? So that one day you'll be floating around on a cloud?
Well, when you put it that way.
May I suggest something?
Sure.
When you walk your dog this evening, observe reality with a full heart and not with a cunning little mind, which is always reasoning, debating, trying to choose between this and that. Find out, and perhaps you will see that once your confusion ends, there are no choices to be made.
No choices. I'm not quite sure I know what you mean, but I'll give it a shot. Before you go on, there's something I want to get off my chest. I've heard a lot of people say that to truly become a Buddha and awaken, you must suffer. What would you say to that?
This is true. Suffering exists, ultimately to awaken us.
Really? And why is that?
Think about it. You obviously have to have dissatisfaction with your current hypnotic life. Otherwise, how would you know that you were misguided and to be moved to snap out of it? Suffering reveals it and compels one's awakening.
I suppose you have to go through enough discomfort to know that you don't want it anymore. Although, as one Buddhist monk said, people have a hard time letting go of their suffering out of the fear of the unknown. They prefer suffering that is familiar.
That is true as well. Conditioned people prefer their patterns, which causes their suffering.
I see.
And that brings us to the second truth, samudaya, which is the real cause of suffering.
Desire, right?
Desire. Here we go again. The word samudaya means origin or cause. The cause of dukkha is not desire. It's the idea that suffering can end through the attainment of one's desires, whatever they may be.
I get it. Like that Mick Jagger song, I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
Ah, yes, the Stones, Summer of 65. I'm more of a sympathy for the Devil era fan. And to be clear, you can get satisfaction, you just can't keep it. The notion that there is a permanent source of satisfaction somewhere out there is an illusion.
What do you mean? Why is it an illusion?
Because unless one lives in abject poverty or is forced to endure violence and abuse, the source of one's suffering is not a worldly need that you can satisfy. It is a deep sense of loneliness and impermanence and not feeling secure and loved. And so one mistakenly tries to appease that deep psychological yearning by shoring up an imaginary fortress with knowledge, wealth, relationships, status, anything that adds substance to the ethereal self that is believed to be lacking, in order to protect it from the storms of impermanence. And that misguided idea, that hungry ghost, simply creates further expectations and grasping for what can never be had.
I heard someone say that you can never get enough of what you don't really need. Is that what you mean by can never be had?
Exactly. Certainty, everlasting comfort, permanence in an impermanent world, which brings us to the third truth, nirodha, or cessation. In order to stop craving, one must understand the nature of it, deep within one's bones. One must recognize unequivocally that the desire to relieve that feeling of uncertainty and lacking, the illusory desire for permanence through acquisition and attachment, or by becoming something or someone, can never satisfy one's essential needs.
Which are what exactly?
Being in touch with and connected to what's real and true in oneself and in life. The eternal, the interdependent, transient, not self nature of reality.
I see.
Look, you seem to be doing a lot of craving and grasping yourself. Do you not want to know the fourth truth?
Of course I do.
Very good. So the fourth and final truth is marga, which is the path that leads one away from mindless craving and suffering.
Yeah, that one I Googled. And from what I remember, this path is what you refer to as the middle way. and is something you define in the Eightfold Path. But here's where I'd like you to pause and explain something to me.
Of course, my clever searching friend.
Thanks, I think. So you said earlier that the 6 years leading up to your awakening wasn't a spiritual quote unquote journey. In fact, all of your searching and striving had essentially come to an end because, as you said, it led nowhere.
That is very true. I came to my realization despite my efforts, not because of them.
Right. So then here's what I'm getting at. Spirituality can't be achieved, right?
The word spiritual comes from the word for breath or life force, and so it means to wake up to the aliveness and joy of existence. You cannot take a journey to awakening and aliveness, to the truth of reality, to the beauty of what is. The center of existence is not a goal to be achieved. It's right here, right now. In fact, you only move away from it by searching.
Right. So then what good is a middle way and an eightfold path?
You must remember, most people are in a wakeful sleep of ignorance to that aliveness, to their true selves. The Eightfold Path, also called the Middle Path or the Threefold Way, which is the fourth part of the Four Truths, is intended to shift one's consciousness and perception through practice. It's about living in accordance with the way of things as they are and with ourselves as we are, which quiets the mind and puts an end to self-deceptive, self-destructive thoughts and behavior.
Hold on. 8, middle, 3, 4. Sounds like a complicated dance routine to me. But in all seriousness, do you really believe that you discovered steps or a method to achieve enlightenment?
There are no steps to take, but rather an attitude and guiding approach that leads you away from that futile, dukkha-producing activity and the suffering we see all around us and feel within us. And let's back up a minute and discuss this Western idea of enlightenment, which seems to intrigue and confuse so many people.
Please, let's.
Okay, what do you imagine enlightenment to be?
Oh, I don't know. Some type of mystical experience, I guess.
Yes, something extraordinary. Astral beings, nirvanic bliss.
Yeah, I guess so.
Absolute ecstasy, unconditional love, an orgasmic moment of interconnectedness and oneness with everything.
Now you're talking.
How romantic. It sounds like great sex, or perhaps a good trip on mushrooms.
Actually, it kind of sounds like a line I used at a bar once. So describe it for me then.
There's really nothing to describe because it wasn't an experience. It was a realization, a state of mind. I didn't have some otherworldly encounter or receive the answers to all of life's mysteries. I simply woke up from my deep sleep of ignorance and had an insight into my true nature. And that created a permanent shift in my consciousness.
I'm still not sure I really understand what you're saying.
It's impossible for me to put it into words, such that it conveys the sense of my intimate connection with reality. Sure, I can describe the great Ganges River to you, and in many rich and dramatic ways. But no matter what I tell you, you will never feel wet.
Oh, come on. Give it a try at least.
Okay, so it was like a flash of truth about who I really am, which released me from my tight, self-obsessed grasp on reality and opened me up to the amazement and abundance of existence. I could observe the aliveness of the world without any distortion, without identifying with it. It was the most natural and free state of existence, calm, alert, aware, but more vibrant and alive than any words can describe.
Wow.
Now, that said, people around me did sense that shift in my consciousness, in my presence. They imagined it to be driven by some otherworldly happening. Some even asked me if I was a god or a prophet.
And what did you tell them?
I said, no, I am awake. And just like that, I get the moniker Buddha, which literally means awakened or that which has become aware. So do you see, it was no big deal.
No big deal? I read somewhere that following your enlightenment, you could walk on water, walk through walls, become invisible, and levitate yourself. And I'm not sure what this means, but I also read that you could make copies of yourself, which I guess would come in really handy if you woke up hungover and had to head into the office for an important meeting.
I think you may be reading too much. I had simply come to the recognition of the true nature of reality and of my being.
Which is?
Which is the same for all people. We are alert, vibrant, resilient, living beings like a bird, a tree, a flowing river, connected to every other living thing. There is nothing independent. Our true nature is one of peaceful existence, compassion, and clarity. We experience without accepting, rejecting, or judging anything, free from the mind that creates diversion, free from the mind that creates division and clings stubbornly to a permanent self.
Okay, here we go. I was actually going to ask you about that. You're talking about the fact that there is, as you've said, no self, correct?
What do you mean by that?
I don't know. I suppose that one's sense of being a separate self is an illusion.
I never said any such thing. Again, you're either misinformed or confused. What I did teach was not self. In other words, to stop the incessant I, me, my way of experiencing the world, which creates conflict, craving, and attachment. Do you understand? You must rediscover your nature. Life is not about you, not self-nature. So let it go.
So, to be clear, the difference between no self and not self is what exactly?
So anatta, or not self. Well, first, to question what the self is and whether or not it even exists is a waste of time. Where does it lead? Will the answer end dukkha? Of course not. In fact, either way you answer, I have a self, I have no self, you will eventually arrive at all manner of difficulties and unpleasantness, suffering.
But I've heard that people who experience this idea of no self or non-dualism feel a profound sense of relief and a profound sense of freedom.
Of course, temporarily. Just like when you gaze in amazement at the billions of stars in the night sky, or deeply into your lover's eyes. In that moment of awe, you disappear. There's no feeling of self. The important question to ask is, how can I attain the same liberating feeling all the time?
Okay, how?
By focusing on the not self of reality. When you realize that the world is not about you, you have no need for ideas of self or not self. You see no point in answering the questions because you've found the ultimate relief.
I see. I think I understand. And so back to my question. What's the purpose of a middle path?
That's the purpose. The middle path is a philosophy of life, a way of living to help with that liberation. It steers one clear of the extremes of self-concerned striving as a way to achieve one's goal to end suffering.
I see.
There's the self-gratification way of striving, which is intended to affirm and bolster the self, which ends up causing suffering. And there's the self-sacrificial approach, meant through suffering to deny and diminish the self. I have tried both approaches, and they are selfish, self-absorbed and misguided ways. To see the truth is to see the falseness of such approaches, including the non-dual no-self way, which is simply another way of denying the self.
So there's no path to enlightenment, but rather a decision to just give up or, I don't know, surrender to the flow of existence. But to what end?
Self-transcendence, perspective and peace, non-referential looseness, unconditional love, being truly free and alive.
Wow, that sounds pretty great. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to tell you, I grabbed one of the most popular memes on the internet which is attributed to you. And it says, believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and common sense. What exactly did you mean by that?
You called it, what was that again? A meme.
Yeah. A meme is a self-replicating piece of information that spreads around from person to person. I've even seen that saying of yours on a refrigerator magnet.
What do you mean by self-replicating? Doesn't information get passed consciously from one individual to the next, like a cup of nourishing tea?
Well, on the internet, people pass information to thousands or even millions of people by clicking a button. And then those people click their buttons and pass it around to millions more, and so on and so on.
Wait, what? Are you kidding me? Ideas just rip through the public consciousness like that?
Yeah, I know. But most of it's just silly shit, like photos of grumpy cats and celebrities with funny sayings superimposed over them. I saw one meme with a headshot of the Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov, and over his photo it read, "Why is Pavlov's hair so soft?" Because he conditioned it. Get it? You know, Pavlov. Like feed the dog and ring the bell, conditioning. Oh, come on.
You must be living during extremely confusing times.
Why do you say that?
Think about it. First, I never said that meme or whatever you call it about belief. Plus, why would you spread around valueless or inaccurate and damaging words and images? Corrupt the mind, corrupt the world.
I've never thought about it like that.
We are all connected. One, ergo, the Eightfold Path. Right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration.
I get it. The Eightfold Path is the right way to approach life if you care about the well-being of everyone.
Everyone and everything, including yourself. Well-being is a state of contentment, equanimity, and non-conflict. And yes, you can have that state of being so long as you are content with what is, what's happening in this moment, and not ruminating on what has happened or worrying about what's going to happen, craving something different. But if you want that state along with joy, growth, support, and sustenance during challenging times, and fun and excitement, you need others to see the right path as well.
All right, then. I have 2 final questions for you.
Wait, I have one for you.
One what? Question?
No, just some silly shit, as you say.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, a student of the Buddha asked him, "Is it okay to use email?" "Yes," replied the Buddha, "but with no attachments."
So, how does it feel to not get a reaction? All right, you win. So, back to my final questions for you. First, since your death, what has been the most misinterpreted teaching of yours that's caused you to roll over in your grave, so to speak?
First of all, I was cremated, so there was no rolling over, as you say. But I understand what you are asking. As you've shown, I've been misquoted over the years, and there have been many misconceptions of my teachings as well. Other than the obvious ones, there is no self, and desire is the cause of suffering. I'd say the one that really gets my goat. Get it?
That's a really strange idiom, but yeah, I get it. Gautama. I guess death has turned you into quite the comedian.
I knew you'd like that one. And yes, death. Death of the demon, Mayalaka, the embodiment of ignorance and of greedy, possessive selfhood. When that happens, it really lightens you up. Anyway, to answer your question, the one that bothers me the most is this overarching idea that there is something one can do to be psychologically free. There's actually nothing to do. It's like one of those Chinese finger traps. You'll stay stuck until you stop trying to get unstuck.
That's quite puzzling to me, Because didn't you once say something about having great determination?
See what I mean? That idea comes much later during the Tang dynasty in China from a form of Mahayana Buddhism called Chan. You're probably more familiar with the Japanese pronunciation Zen.
I see.
In any event, be prepared, my friend, because I guarantee that you'll be dealing with similar misunderstandings when you speak with future guests.
I'm sure you're right. Okay, last question. If you could place a short message on a marquee sign in front of every school in the world, what would it say?
You mean instead of believe nothing, no matter where you read it? Just kidding. My message would simply be this: know your mind. For the benefit of all living things, know your mind.
And be chill?
Sure, and be chill.
Well, Siddhartha Gautama, thank you for joining I Hear Dead People. It's been a true pleasure.
The pleasure was Pratita Samupada.
Excuse me?
Interdependent co-arising.
Again, what?
What is the sound of one hand clapping?
Okay, I've heard that one before, but it doesn't really help.
What is the sound?
I suppose there isn't a sound.
Now you see it. The interdependent co-arising of our hands clapping, our essences dancing during this conversation, produced the pleasure for us and hopefully for your listeners. Do you see? We are not separate. We are part of a unified field of behavior. You and I, as individuals, don't mean anything until our hands clap against the hands of others.
I've never thought of it like that before. Thank you very much, Sid.
Dhanyavad.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to this episode of I Hear Dead People. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. And if you like this podcast, please share it with your friends and consider giving us a rating and leaving a review. 5 stars would be nice. This helps other listeners find the show. And please let us know what you think by visiting our website at iheardeadpeople.com. You could submit comments and questions, give us suggestions for future dead guests, and learn more about how to support the show. In our next episode, we'll be unpacking what the Buddha had to say, as well as addressing some of the questions his conversation stimulated. So please join us. And until then, be chill.